Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Kushina raised Naruto as a shinobi god instead of Jiraiya? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Three figures sat in a room deep within the Aburame compound. Shibi, the Aburame clan head. Might Guy, an elite Jonin and Konoha's undisputed master at hand-to-hand combat, and Yugao Azuki. Another elite Jonin and ANBU member along with being the only living student of Kushina Uzumaki, the previous head of the Uzumaki clan of Konoha's sister village Uzushiogakure. It was the morning after the traitor Mizuki tricked Naruto Uzumaki into stealing the forbidden scroll of seals. The three sat in silence for a few moments before Yugao sighed, "We've really failed Naruto." Shibi adjusted his glasses. "It has been aggravating on how little we've been able to do for young Uzumaki. Considering the Hokage's order to keep our distance from him, there isn't much we can do," Guy growled. He'd tried focusing his frustration into pulling his rival Kakashi out of his depressed funk with challenge after challenge, but it hadn't worked. I mean, Yugao was given the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style, and I was given their Taijutsu style, so we'd be able to teach young Naruto and he'd have something of his clan. Shino has also told me that there has been no mention of the Uzumaki at the academy, Shibi said, once more adjusting his glasses, with a slight angered buzzing coming from him. Perhaps the time for the gentle approach has passed. Guy nodded, in more ways than one. I'd hoped Tenten and Lee could help Neji see that fate doesn't control him. Guy sighed and ran a hand down his face. No. I just didn't want to do more. Stuck in my own grief and goal of helping Kakashi, his gaze became one of steel as he said, no more. We must do something for the next generation. Does that mean you'll stop holding yourself back as well? Yugao inquired with a raised eyebrow, getting a nod from Guy. I will speak with Hiruzen soon, Shibi said. I shall remind him of a few things. Yugao, I assume you wouldn't mind being his sensei. Course not, Yugao scoffed. Better me than Kakashi, who the civilians would blackmail into focusing on the last Uchiha. After all, Sasuke was Rookie of the Year and the one with that title is always put with the dead last, and we already know Kakashi as the most likely sensei to take Sasuke. Shibi nodded. Then it's settled. Guy, I am curious to see what you'll do with your team now that you are no longer holding back. The grin Guy gave was slightly terrifying given his normal nice guy persona. A couple hours later, while Hiruzen was working on the everlasting, unkillable evil that was paperwork, when the intercom crackled to life and his secretary let him know that Shibi Aburame wished to see him. Jumping at the chance to take a small break from the bane of every cage. Shibi entered, sat in the chair before his desk and much to Hiruzen's surprise placed a seal tag on the table and activated it. From what he knew of Fuinjutsu, it was a security seal so others couldn't overhear. Shibi, what can I do for you? Hiruzen asked. Did you know that Kushina appointed me as a backup godfather for young Naruto in case Jiraiya failed? Shibi asked, getting a surprised look from the Hokage as Shibi pulled a scroll from his pocket. I have with me my copy of Kushina's will. I had that sealed. Hiruzen growled, only to flinch back when Shibi lowered his glasses to look at the Hokage. The last time Hiruzen had seen Shibi do that, Shibi had destroyed the Iowa shinobi who'd nearly killed Shibi's fiancée. Returning his glasses to their normal position, he said, "You had Konoha's copy sealed." "This is my personal copy. I would have come earlier, but I had a few things I needed to double check." Did you know that Kushina never made the Uzumaki clan a Konoha clan? They still count as an Uzushio clan, and as per the treaty, as long as one Uzumaki is aligned with Konoha, the treaty is in full effect. This also means that Kushina and by extension her son Naruto are the de facto ambassadors to the Uzumaki clan, and it is illegal to seal an ambassador's will. As Shibi spoke, Hiruzen seemed to deflate. Had he really failed young Naruto that much? On top of that, you ordered Yugao, Might Guy and myself to stay away from young Naruto when you knew that Yugao was chosen to pass down the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style. the surging serpent, while Might Guy has their taijutsu style, the storming dragon. Hiruzen winced. He had made that order. Had his grief at his wife's, Minato's and Kushina's death blinded him this much? Defeat was clear in his voice as Hiruzen asked, Shibi, what do you think I should do? Have you put together any of the new genin teams? Shibi asked. Hiruzen shook his head, I was going to do that after lunch. First thing to do is, don't put Naruto and Sasuke on the same team and definitely not under Kakashi, Shibi said. Kakashi would be blackmailed by the civilian council to focus on Sasuke, letting the other to fall behind. Kurenai is also not a good pick. Her skills with genjutsu might be Jonin level, but everything else is mid-chunin at best. There is also the fact that she sabotaged the Kurama clan by having their heir sealed. She said that young Yakumo would never be able to use her bloodline. Hiruzen frowned. How is that sabotage? She only trained Yakumo for a week, something which my wife told me as she knew Yakumo's mother, Shibi replied, getting a shocked look from Hiruzen. As you know, young Yakumo Kurama's bloodline creates a second personality in her mind. The Edo. My wife looked into the origin of the word, and found it comes from the studies of a psychologist from Kumo. In his studies, the ID is the darker aspects of the mind. The darker her life and thoughts, the stronger the Edo. As such, the more positivity in her life, the weaker the Edo. Due to the seal, which can be seen as a betrayal from her sensei and from you as you had to agree to it, there is a lot she has to be bitter about. My wife also has some knowledge of Fuinjutsu due to Kushina teaching her, and found that the seal on Yakumo is faulty and the Edo can easily influence her. She told me she tried to teach young Yakumo for a month, Hiruzen said, slumping down. That's 2 clan heirs he failed. Then straightened a fire in his eyes. I'll recall Jiraiya to check and possibly her seal, apologize to Yakumo in person and ask Inoichi to get young Yakumo therapy to help her fight the Edo. I will also confront Kurenai about this. Shibi nodded. Now back to Naruto. I suggest putting Naruto, Hinata and Shino on a team under Yugao Azuki. This would let Naruto retrieve training from his mother's remaining student, receive part of his inheritance and also assist Hinata Hyuga. The Aburame clan have always been allies of the Uzumaki clan as they were the ones who brought us to Konoha. Hinata also has a severe inferiority complex and Naruto and Shino can help her. Naruto's enthusiasm is quite infectious according to Shino, and Shino's stoic calm is a good balance. They also have a wide range of possible specializations. Naruto has senses as keen as an Inuzuka, so could be good at tracking. The raw chakra of the Uzumaki so ninjutsu is a given. Due to both his parents excelling in Fuinjutsu along with being an Uzumaki, you could say the sealing art is in his blood, which along with his creative mind he could surpass both. He has pranked, outran and hid from the ANBU for years and in a bright orange jacket and pants. As such, if he has such high stealth skills now, what would happen if he wore colors appropriate for the area? His pranking has already laid the basics for a trap master, and given the Byakugan and Aburame Kikaichu, you have the grounds for an infiltration and sabotaging team. You also have a capture and interrogation team in the makings. The possibilities for this combination are immense, plus Hinata and Shino have never belittled Naruto unlike almost every other member of the class. Hiruzen stayed quiet as he thought about this. It's true that most of the class was antagonistic towards the young Uzumaki, so the teamwork that Konoha prided itself on would be next to impossible to create. Shibi's suggestion had merit. Why put this team under Yugao instead of Kakashi? The blackmail issue could be countered by a direct order from me. Kakashi spends all his time at the Memorial Stone and is late for every mission that is not an A- rank, Shibi replied. He also uses the bell test as his sensei did and simply expects his team to work together. The bell test itself is flawed. It is a case of throwing 3 children together who might not even like each other and expect them to put their differences aside and work together. Tell me, Hiruzen, how many children have the maturity to put their feelings to the side to work with those they dislike if not completely hate? Hiruzen sighed. When said like that he could see the flaw in the test. Even with his genin team, it was Tsunade who got Jiraiya and Orochimaru to work together, as the two even then had a strong dislike for the other. I see your point. The Bell test is only good if the groundwork to make a good team is already there. Another problem is the Ninja Academy is under the control of the Civilian Council and is far too focused on theory, and the practical side suffers as a result. I would suggest making a small team to investigate if Naruto is the only one who's been sabotaged, though the fact he wasn't caught means they had to teach everyone equally. We are still low on Shinobi after the massacre and Kyuubi attack. As such, any sabotage on the upcoming genin could be seen as sabotage to Konoha itself. Hiruzen sighed and ran a hand down his face. Even more to do on his already full plate. Very well. I'll have Ibiki and Inoichi arrange the investigation. I assume that you've already spoken with Yugao since you specifically mentioned her. Indeed, Shibi replied. Hiruzen nodded. I'll make sure she gets the team. Thank you for bringing all this to my attention, Shibi. Depending on how things go, I might have you take over the overhaul for the academy. Shibi simply gave a small nod. Rose took his security seal and left the room. He was curious to see how things would go with this small nudge. A week later, Naruto entered the academy, proudly wearing his forehead protector. Upon entering his homeroom for the last time, he hid a smirk at the surprised looks from all the other new genin. Taking a seat in the back, he was surprised when a few minutes later Shino sat next to him. I see you managed to earn your headband. Congratulations, Shino said in his normal monotone. Thanks Shino, Naruto said, not used to people other than Iruka-sensei, the Ichirakus and Hokage acknowledging him. So who do you think our Jonin senseis will be? Shino adjusted his glasses. I am unsure. There are too many possibilities. I simply hope that whoever it is can help us reach our full potential. Yeah, I can't wait to become an awesome ninja, Dadbeo. Naruto cheered. The two continued to talk, ignoring Sasuke's fangirls who were somehow worse in their arguments. Doubly so when Ino and Sakura appeared, since Ino had started to claim that as a clan heir she'd be the obvious best choice for Sasuke, who's also a clan heir. That just started an entirely new argument. When the door opened and Iruka entered holding a couple papers, everyone noticed he seemed a bit somber. Seeing the argument Sasuke's fangirls were in, he made a single hand sign and shouted, "Shut up and take your seats." His head growing to almost comical proportions, but as always his big head jutsu got the job done. I'll keep this brief. First, I want to say how proud of you all I am. I hope you all have long fulfilling lives as proud shinobi of Konoha. Now onto the teams. Naruto noticed that teams 1 through 5 were either made of only civilian-born students, or members of minor clans. Team 6 will be Shino Aburame, Hinata Hyuga and Naruto Uzumaki under elite Jonin Yugao Azuki. Hinata let out a small eep at being on a team with Naruto and fought hard to keep herself from passing out. Doubly so since she'd taken a seat on the row below Naruto and Shino. Why does Naruto Baka get an elite Jonin instead of Sasuke? Sakura screeched and was about to say more until she saw the glare Iruka was sending her. Sakura, you're a genin now, so act like it, Iruka growled, making the pink-haired Kunoichi gulp. You'll soon find that life in a classroom and life in the field are two vastly different things. Now Team 7 will be Kiba Inuzuka, Shikamaru Nara. Here Shikamaru and Choji sat up straight, and Sasuke Uchiha under elite Jonin Asuma Sarutobi. Ha! Take that Naruto Baka, Sakura said before she could stop herself as she got up and pointed at Naruto. You're not the only one with an elite Jonin as your sensei. And Sasuke-kun's is directly related to the Hokage. Sakura, Iruka said quietly, though it still caused Sakura to freeze and slowly turn to the Chunin. As a genin you are considered an adult. So once more, act like one. Sakura gulped as she sat down. As Iruka coughed into his hand, Team 8 will be Choji Akamaiki, Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka under Jonin Ensui Nara. Cousin Ensui, Shikamaru said in shock, completely ignoring the fact he wasn't on a team with his best friend. I didn't know he was taking a genin team. Team 10 was another team made of minor clan members and civilians. You all have 1 hour for lunch before your sensei arrives. Take the time to get to know your teammates if you don't know them, and once again I wish you all the best of luck. Iruka then picked up the papers and left the room. Shino tilted his head slightly before shaking it. Standing up he said, "Why don't we get some food and get to know each other a little more? I must admit I know only the basics about you two, and I'm sure you both must have questions for me as well." Ichiraku's. Naruto suggested. What about the bakery a couple blocks away? The one near the weapon shop run by that old couple? Hinata suggested. Naruto frowned. He'd tried the place once and was instantly kicked out for making a disturbance, when he was just browsing the menu, though maybe since he was a genin things would be different now. I guess that's fine. It's no ramen though. If Hinata and Shino noticed his small stutter they didn't comment on it. During the walk the three spoke about themselves. Hinata spoke about her family's fighting style, the Jukin, and a few chakra control exercises that Naruto could try to get his massive amount of chakra under control. Shino spoke about his hive, how they could drain chakra and how he could communicate with them to spy on bandits and the like. Naruto spoke about his high stealth skills, the shadow clone jutsu, and some of his favorite pranks. When Shino brought up his sexy jutsu and that it's a distraction technique he could use that with his shadow clones to either overwhelm an opponent's senses, or a way for his shadow clones to get a surprise attack on the enemy. Naruto, Hinata asked, nervously tapping the tips of her fingers together, how did you come up with that jutsu? Naruto shrugged, I saw how many people reacted to the swimsuit magazine in bookstores or those small orange books. I figured I could use that to my advantage, so I looked at those magazines whenever I had the chance to learn the form. Add some experimentation and voila. One special distraction technique that seems to work on everyone, including the Hokage. Hinata was relieved that Naruto got it just from swimsuit magazines, which were a lot better than some other places he could have gotten it from. When the trio arrived at the bakery, Naruto held the door for his teammates, but upon entering the cashier barked out, here to cause another ruckus. Though the moment he saw that not only did Naruto have a forehead protector but both the Aburame and Hyuga heirs were standing with the brat, he froze. Feeling sweat start to run down the back of his head at the angered look from the Hyuga and the unreadable look from the Aburame, he quickly backtracked, I mean, what can I get for you? Naruto was shocked at the reversal, but the three made their orders. Hinata got some cinnamon rolls, Shino got some berry and honey biscuits, one of which he slipped into his sleeve so his Kikaichu could eat, and Naruto got a cinnamon roll, a berry and honey biscuit, a couple different kinds of cookies, and a new kind of food the bakery was experimenting with called quiche, that originated from Takigakure at Shino's suggestion. The slice Naruto got had mushrooms, ham, and cheese. The cashier expected the demon brat to hate it, cause a stink and be thrown out, but upon taking his first bite Naruto's eyes went wide. This is amazing. It's not as good as ramen, but it's still good. The cashier was dumbfounded as the trio went back to their conversation while keeping their voices down. Once the trio returned to the academy they sat off to one side and waited for their sensei to arrive. 10 minutes later the door opened and 3 jonin entered, 2 men and a woman. All 3 wearing the standard Konoha jonin attire. The first man had his black hair pulled back into a single ponytail, had large shadows under his eyes as if he was always tired, and a small goatee. The next male had short black spiky hair and beard, and had an unlit cigarette in his mouth. The third was a woman with a sheathed sword on her back and waist-length purple hair. Team 6 with me, the woman said, Naruto, Shino and Hinata quickly moving down to stand before her. Team 7, come here, the bearded jonin said with Kiba and Sasuke moving down, Shikamaru leisurely walking down before his sensei barked out, move it Nara. Shikamaru picked up the pace with Ensui snorting in amusement. Team 8, Get down here, Ensui drawled, making most think he was the typical lazy Nara before he said with much more steel in his voice, now. Before I get annoyed, Sakura, Ino and Choji quickly made their way to stand before Ensui. Do either of you mind if we take the roof? Yugao asked. Go ahead, Asuma replied, we'll head to our training ground. And we'll head to ours, Ensui said and turned and left. Follow me, his genin quickly followed their sensei. Hey, it's not often you see a Nara put their lazy tendencies aside, Asuma chuckled before turning to his team, come on. We're going to training ground 12. Yugao turned to her genin with a small smile, as I said we're heading to the roof. Follow me. When the four got to the roof, Yugao took a seat on a small chair and motions for her students to sit on a bench before her. Let's get right to it, shall we? I'll introduce myself and would like you to do so in a similar manner. My name is Yugao Azuki, the last remaining student of Kushina Uzumaki. Here Naruto's eyes went wide at the last name. My focus is Kenjutsu, specifically the Surging Serpent, which I learned from Kushina Sensei, and the Hidden Tree Crescent style from my colleague Hayate Gecko, who is considered Konoha's top sword master. My current dream is to make the three of you the best shinobi I possibly can. I like practicing with my sword, training with Hayate, and the occasional trip to a spa. I dislike slackers, those who become shinobi to impress others, and those who let others control their life. Now Shino, why don't you start? Hinata shifted slightly at the mention of impressing others. Shino adjusted his glasses. My name is Shino Aburame, heir of the Aburame clan. My current focus is advancing in skill with my family's ninjutsu style that uses our kikaichu. My current dream is to discover new types of insects, or failing that, to find new ways to use my kikaichu. I like studying insects, fresh fruit, honey, and spending time meditating in the forest. I dislike those who insult or needlessly kill insects. Parasites such as fleas, lice and the like, and those who make rash judgments or comments and do not retract those statements when proven wrong. When Yugao looked at Hinata, the girl gulped but managed to gather her courage. My name is Hinata Hyuga, heir of the Hyuga clan. My current goal is to get better at my family's taijutsu style, the gentle fist, and Hinata gulped and tried to talk about Naruto before shaking her head. It would take a long time before she was ready to talk about her crush, but at least she wasn't stammering like she normally did. I like cinnamon rolls, my younger sister Hanabi, pressing flowers and stargazing. I dislike how my family is split. When tradition dictates the present to the point there's no progress, and I don't have the best opinion of Kumogakure. When Yugao turned to Naruto, she saw he was completely still, his shocked expression plain as day. Clapping her hands in front of his face, she gave him a kind smile. Anyone would be stunned to hear the name of the woman who was most likely their mother out of the blue after all. Naruto quickly shook his head and got his normal cheer back. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, Dadbeo. Naruto cheered. My current goal is to become good enough to become Hokage and gain everyone's respect. I like ramen, pranking those who deserve it, and like Shino spending time in the forest to clear my head and come up with new prank ideas. I dislike the 3 minutes it takes to make instant ramen, Mizuki Tem and Sasuke Tem. Yugao nodded. Alright. Now normally there'd be a second test to prove you're worthy of the title of genin, as the academy test is to show you have the base skills. However, just because that's tradition does not mean it's legally required. As such, I'm going to do my best to turn you three from the rough chunks of coal I found you, and turn you into gleaming diamonds of what it means to be a shinobi. First off, Yugao turned to Naruto. I need to know this. Were you properly taught how to read and write? Hinata and Shino's eyes widened and quickly turned to Naruto, who blushed and looked away, but that was all the answer Yugao needed. Thought so. So for the first few days we'll be training at the Aburame compound. Shino's mother Orchid also knew your mother and is willing to teach you the basics of Fuinjutsu, or as it's more commonly known, the sealing arts. She plans to abuse your ability to make shadow clones to rectify that problem in one day. How would shadow clones help with that? Naruto asked, scratching his head in confusion. Alright, let's go through a hypothetical scenario, Yugao said. Let's say we're infiltrating an enemy stronghold, and we come across a door. You send a shadow clone in as a scout, you trip a trap and a kunai launcher activates and kills the clone. You would know how far in your clone was, what triggered the trap, and what kind of trap it was. So if you use that when training chakra control, then even if you use only a single clone, you are literally cutting the training time in half. Naruto's eyes lit up at the potential of the jutsu he learned. As his mind was whirling with possibilities, Shino inquired, if the jutsu is that useful, why is this my first time hearing about it? Because it's considered a kinjutsu for two reasons, Yugao explained. First reason is normally only a jonin has enough chakra to use it and continue fighting, as it takes your chakra and evenly distributes it between you and the clones. So a single clone would have half your chakra, two clones would each have a third, and so on. The second reason is not everyone can handle the memory transfer, and in a fight that can be dangerous. I plan to get you and Hinata able to make at least one clone, and then have the clones do simple exercises like various taijutsu kata or chakra control exercises. When they burst, you two will be meditating and we'll slowly work up to combat exercises with them. I made almost 100 when I fought Mizuki Tem, Naruto said, once more confused. How was I able to do that if the jutsu split my chakra? And how come I wasn't affected when they burst? As I said, some people can't handle it. If you can handle almost 100 bursting at once, then that shows you have a good affinity with the technique. You are also a member of the Uzumaki clan of Uzushiogakure, Yugao explained and raised a hand to prevent Naruto from speaking. Yes. You have a clan, and the fact the academy said nothing about them is a problem for another time and for other people. Your mother Kushina Uzumaki was one of the few survivors of Uzu when a combined army of Iwa, Kumo and Mizu invaded them at the start of the Third Shinobi War due to being in Konoha at the time. You are also the last known member of the Uzumaki clan's main line. All the genin's eyes went wide, as that meant Naruto was clan heir by default. Learning about the Uzumaki will be one of the things I teach you. 3. What's important is the Uzumaki clan have dense and powerful chakra compared to others, with the main line's chakra being even denser and more powerful. As such, low-level jutsu such as the basic Bushin would be difficult if not impossible for you to do when making only a couple. As such, the more chakra-intense clones such as the elemental and shadow clones were the Uzumaki's go-to clones. A slight buzzing could be heard from Shino. If that's the case, then why did none of the teachers at the academy? The buzzing became louder as Shino's face darkened. Sabotage, they were sabotaging Naruto. Yugao's face turned grim as she nodded, yes. However, you don't need to worry about that. Her face turned dark, trust me. That will be taken care of. Her expression quickly went back to her calm expression. Now let's head over to the Aburame compound, shall we? Author's notes. I've been toying with ideas of writing a Naruto story for a while. So a few things to go over. First, some jutsus will use their Japanese names, and some will use their translated names. This is partly due to some just having better names in Japanese, in my opinion. Rasengan being a great example, as its translated name is spiraling sphere. It gets the point across but sounds so basic. Second, I'll also only use honorifics if I feel it's necessary. Sensei and Sama being examples of ones I'll use. As for Might Guy, in the anime he was shown to have the Tortoise clan as summons even if he rarely used it, plus according to the wiki he taught Tenten how to use most of her tools, showing he's at least proficient in them. I've always thought he chose to hold back to try and help Kakashi, so if that's the case and he's already an elite jonin, then what would he be like if he stopped holding back and used his full range of skills? I'm still going to try to keep his normal self in mind, but we'll have a much more serious guy in this story. Also, the reason Asuma didn't lead his team to Training Ground 7 is because that's where the Memorial Stone is, and Asuma doesn't want to put up with Kakashi's BS. When the group reached the Aburame compound, The guards gave the four of them nods, and a woman with violet hair that went down to her shoulders, and a white flower tucked behind her left ear, wearing a white lab coat with small orchid flowers running down her sides, met them at the front door. Yugao, right on time. Our third training ground is free, Shino can show you the way. Naruto, please make 5 clones who'll accompany your team while the real you comes with me. The woman led Naruto inside while Yugao took his clones and teams along the side of the house. Looking over her shoulder, the woman said, "My name is Orchid Aburame, it's a pleasure to meet you." Yeah, nice to meet you too, Naruto replied, still unused to people being polite to him. The two entered a large room with several tables, each with small stools around them. This is the main dining room for the compound, and can hold a total of 75 people comfortably. She then turned and handed him a scroll. In this storage scroll are a stack of 25 sheets of paper, a brush and some ink. Now please make 70 clones and have them take a seat. Naruto did as instructed and his clones quickly moved to take their seats. Now each of you put your scroll on the table, put a small amount of chakra into the scroll and that will release the paper, brush and ink. The clones did as instructed, and put a single sheet of paper before them as Orchid unsealed a stack of papers from a scroll and began handing the paper she had to each clone. Each of you has a single kanji I'd like you to practice. Once you have gone through your entire stack of paper, burst one table at a time. Then Naruto will remake you and you'll begin again. Why? The original Naruto asked, why do I have to do all this? A few reasons, Orchid replied. First, Fuinjutsu requires a high level of calligraphy, so by doing this you are not only learning how to properly write but you're also training your calligraphy at the same time. As they do that, I'll help you learn how to read. I hope you're not planning to use a boring book like the ones at the academy, Dadbeo, Naruto grumbled. I have 3 books for you to choose from, Orchid replied with a playful smile as she pulled 3 books from her pocket. The first is about trap making. Something that might interest you as pranks can be seen as the basic form of the skill. Here Naruto perked up. The second is about the basics of seals, as that is what I will teach you. The third and final one, she then placed down a third book. Hiruzen looked up from his paperwork when Kakashi shunshined into the room. I was expecting this. You have questions as to the team placements? Hiruzen asked. Why didn't I get Sensei's son or Sasuke? Kakashi asked with a raised eyebrow, thankful that his mask hid his large frown. He owed both his sensei and Obito to teach their family. It's one of the main reason he didn't take any other students on top of them not understanding how important teamwork was. Do you want the list? Hiruzen replied. Not getting an answer from Kakashi, he continued, alright. Let's go down the main points. First is your laziness. Naruto has been sabotaged since day 1 at the academy. From what Ibiki and Inoichi found in the first week of investigation, Naruto should have passed his first time taking the graduation test. Kakashi's visible eye widened. As such, he needs a hand-on sensei, not one who will be 3 to 4 hours later because he feels like it. On top of that, Yugao has just as much a claim to teach him as you, if not more so, as she's Kushina's only living student and was given the Uzumaki Kenjutsu style, so she can pass it down to Naruto. Might Guy will even be working with Naruto to teach him Kushina's taijutsu style. Kushina one-san trusted Guy with the Storming Dragon. Kakashi gasped. The Storming Dragon was borderline legendary. At least Yugao having the Surging Serpent made sense. Though, why hasn't Guy shown he has Kushina's style before now? Hiruzen nodded. We both also know the remaining members of the Civilian Council will blackmail you to focus on Sasuke Uchiha simply to spite Naruto and plagiate the Uchiha. They cannot do so with Asuma as being one of the 12 ninja guardians. He also has the daimyo backing him up. Sasuke needs a firm hand at the moment, and Asuma is already planning to start the young man's healing and hopefully deal with his superiority complex and inferiority complex. Kakashi nodded, but before he could say anything, Hiruzen continued, you have also proved that you aren't worthy of being a sensei. Naruto has had 12 years to grow, and in that time you have failed 7 different teams. The genin didn't need to show perfect teamwork in the last 4 of times I had someone watching you test the genin. 2 years ago was a passable team but you still failed them. 3 genin full of potential. 3 genin who decided to take civilian jobs instead. With your track record I'd rather trust Ibiki and Anko with a genin team. Are you serious? Kakashi gasped. Ibiki would terrify the genin and Anko wouldn't know restraint if it approached her dressed as a Miko. Yet they'd prove more worthy sensei. Hiruzen growled. Ibiki takes every job given to him seriously, and knowing him, he'd either raise the most terrifying T&I specialists the world has ever known, or find some way to make them as good strategists as Inara or Aburame. Anko would never abandon her team as she'd never treat them the way Orochimaru treated her. That by itself guarantees she'd do everything she possibly could to make sure they'd make at least Chunin. Now I have paperwork to do. Kakashi vanished in another shunshin. For a moment Hiruzen considered pulling out his crystal ball to see if Kakashi was doing something productive but pushed the thought to the side. He still had far too much paperwork at the moment. Team 8 entered their training ground and Ensui Nara turned to his genin team. He'd already looked at their profiles, and knew he'd have a lot of work ahead of him to get them up to be proper genin. Alright you 3. The 3 looked at their sensei. Ino had a pompous look, as if she thought she could boss him around. Sakura was slightly nervous, though she also sent Ino several annoyed glances. Choji had pulled out a bag of chips and started munching on them. I'm going to be blunt because it's too troublesome to be subtle. You kids are far too pathetic. Before Ino or Sakura could speak up he continued, let's go down the list shall we? Ino, you are the classic example of a pampered princess who despite coming from a military family and should know how to behave or lazy, expect things to just go your way, bossy and prone to loud tantrums if things don't go your way. Sakura is very similar and both of you have also been doing the one thing that could easily be fatal for any warrior, dating. Choji gaped and looked at the two as if he was personally offended while Ino and Sakura's eyes turned red in anger from what he said about them. I'll have to have words with Inoichi since he should have stomped that down years ago. Sakura is only slightly more acceptable since she comes from a civilian background but the academy should have gone over the shinobi diet early on. Choji on the other hand is weak-willed, prefers to let others think for him, and only puts in effort when food is on the line so here are some ground rules. Ensui then grabbed Choji's bag of chips and using pure chakra manipulation incinerated it as his eyes became cold as steel. 1. Ino and Choji will only practice their clan's styles with their clan. 2. There will be no breaks unless I say so. If I tell you to run laps for half an hour then you either run those laps or run until you are unable to move. 3. You will be here by no later than 6:30 in the morning every day unless otherwise stated. What? Sakura yelled. What about my beauty, sleep and figure? You want to worry about those, then drop out of the military. Ensui growled as he flared a small amount of killing intent. This is real life, not some fantasy story where a prince in shining armor will swoop in and rescue you. You either get the skills to survive being a ninja or you die. Sakura took a step back and gulped while Ino and Choji shuddered. No takers to hand in your protectors and leave now. Good. Now I marked out a track around the field. 50 laps. Go. The 3 genin bolted if only to get away from the killing intent their sensei was still releasing. As they ran he made a single shadow clone and sent it off to speak to the genin's parents. He'd save Sakura's for last as that was bound to be the most troublesome. Asuma leaned against a tree as he looked at his team. Kiba couldn't keep still and was shifting from side to side, while Akamaru sat at his side and was looking at him curiously. Shimakuru had his hands in his pockets and slouched over. Both signs of the typical Nara laziness, however he knew that Shikimaru could outlazy even most Jonin Nara. This showed both his potential since the smarter the Nara the lazier they tended to be, but it also showed he couldn't half this. Next was Sasuke Uchiha who even now was off to the side, isolating himself. Asuma would have to tread carefully here, as Sasuke's lust for power was well known and if he mishandled the kid, the last Uchiha could easily go nuke Nin like his brother. Alright, let's go over what we'll do, shall we? Asuma said as he focused fire chakra between his fingers and lit his cigarette with them. Shikamaru, you'll mostly get strength and body training. Using your mind and strategies are all well and good, but if you can't keep up with your opponent or are too slow to use those strategies, then what good are they? Seeing he wasn't getting through to the young Nara, he tried a different tactic. Alright, Shikamaru. Let's put it this way. If Choji was on this team and you didn't have the speed to do your jutsus fast enough or even move fast enough, there's a good chance he'd be dead because you couldn't do what you needed to. That got a reaction. Shikamaru's eyes went wide and it was clear his mind was running through several scenarios as we went through what Asuma said. Seeing the Nara slowly stand up straight, Asuma knew he'd gotten it through the young Nara, at least for now, though Shikamaru would never let his best friend die. Kiba, the young Inuzuka, perked up, curious what his sensei would say. You've got a good grounding for your family's taijutsu style. However, you're too hot-headed, and didn't put all that much effort into the theoretical side of shinobi life. That's not too bad, as from what I can tell, the academy left a lot of the theory that's actually needed for the shinobi life out. So while you're going through some exercises, I'll have a clone work with you on the theoretical side. Of course that won't be the only thing we'll do, but for the first couple weeks it's what we'll focus on. Finally he turned to his last student, Sasuke. Sasuke gave a small grunt and turned to look at his sensei. Few things. First is the lingering trauma from that night. That can hinder you in battle if you ever face your target. Anger can blind you or create mistakes and openings that opponents can use against you. If you ever face them, or even if some just brings it up, you need to be calm and not let them affect your mental state. With me so far. Sasuke thought about it. At first he was just going to scoff and ignore his sensei, but just thinking about him made his blood boil and anger to fog his mind. Fine, Sasuke said, how do we deal with the trauma? That's the part you're not gonna like, Asuma said, taking the cigarette out of his mouth for a moment as he blew out a bit of smoke. You'll need to see a Yamanaka for therapy. I'll make sure they're not gonna report to Ino so you won't be bothered by your fangirl. I'll also make sure whoever it is discreet. Don't need to draw attention when it's not needed, right? Sasuke scowled but nodded. Therapy. That was for lesser people. He was an Uchiha, an elite and the best of the best. But if it would get his sensei off his back, he'd deal with it. Even though it would take time away from training to beat him. As for training, due to your eyes' ability to memorize everything they see, versatility is the name of the game. We'll work on ninjutsu, genjutsu, some taijutsu that should fill any holes your family's style might have, since it needs the Sharingan to reach its full potential, and even some other aspects of shinobi life. Blacksmithing is a possibility, or even medical ninjutsu techniques. Blacksmithing would let you make your own gear, and as past members of your clan have shown, Uchiha steel is some of the best out there. And that's including what's made in the land of iron. Medical knowledge and techniques wouldn't only let you fight longer, but you'd also know how to cripple enemies easier or flat out take them out of the fight completely. Asuma knew he was laying it on a bit thick, but until Sasuke got that therapy, it would be difficult to keep the kid from doing something stupid. He just hoped he wasn't making a mistake with all this, but time would tell. As the trio of genin got started training, the gleam in Sasuke's eyes at the power his sensei planned to give him never left. A gleam Asuma noted and hoped to the sage and Kami that the therapy worked. So the first exercise you'll do is called tree walking. This will not only let you walk on any surface you want, but the more you master your chakra, the less you'll need for your jutsus while maintaining their full power. Yugao explained with a small smile. First step of this exercise is focusing chakra to the soles of your feet, which is the most difficult place on your body to send chakra to. Yugao then demonstrated this by walking up a nearby tree. Once you are able to walk up and down a tree for an hour without stopping, we'll move on to the next level of this exercise. Yugao then jumped off the tree, flipped in mid-air and landed on her feet. As she did, one of the Narutos sniffed the air as the wind changed directions. The scent stirring something in his mind. Quote. Neko. Naruto asked, his clone brothers giving him a puzzled look before they also sniffed the air as Shino and Hinata wondered if their sensei had been in ANBU. Yugao smirked. I wondered if you'd pick up on that. Yes, I am an ANBU captain. I was chosen to be the sensei for this team for a few reasons, one of the main ones being Kushina left the surging serpent style to me so I could teach it to you. The sensei of Team 9 Might Guy has her taijutsu style, the Storming Dragon. You'll be working with him during Friday evening and throughout Saturday while you all have Sunday off. All training and no time for rest will only hinder you. I suggest you all either work on theory on that day or just spend it relaxing. Starting tomorrow though, I'll be wearing my ANBU armor as I much prefer that over the standard Jonin uniform. She didn't mention that the last time she'd been around Naruto was shortly after the orphanage kicked him out for the last time. It is logical to have an ANBU captain as our sensei, Shino said, the more high profile the genin the stronger the jonin. Teams 6, 7 and 8 are either made solely or partly of clan heirs. That is another reason I was chosen to be your sensei. Yes, Yugao agreed. Now enough talk. Let's get to training, shall we? Oh, I forgot to mention. Too much chakra and you'll be blasted away from the tree, and not enough chakra will make you slip off. I want one Naruto to stay back and remake the others for as long as possible. Might Guy stood over his panting students, having just put them through their paces. Even Lee, who was the physically strongest and had the most stamina of them, was panting. Handing them all bottled water with vitamins mixed in, he spoke, you have 10 minutes to rest before we move on. Each one of you have been coasting so far and have refused to learn skills to fill in your weak points. That ends now. All three of them looked up at him in shock. Not even Lee had seen their sensei like this. First, Neji and Tenten will learn some ninjutsu. Lightning and wind for Tenten and earth for Neji. That goes against Hyuga tradition. Neji gasped out, a defiant look in his eyes. At least until Might Guy suddenly went through three hand signs, earth release, rock fist jutsu. Neji's eyes went wide as he barely got out of the way of a large stone fist rising out of the ground and would have sent him flying. Tradition is not law, Neji, now be quiet. Tenten. The kunoichi jumped as her sensei turned to her. So far, despite everything I've taught you, you've focused on throwing your weapons, even ones not meant to be thrown. This can be a useful tactic as no one would expect a ball and chain flying at them with your level of speed and accuracy. However, what will you do when you come across someone with a strong enough earth jutsu to block everything you throw, or a wind jutsu that can blow them away? His eyes narrowed as she shifted slightly. I see you understand. Lightning jutsu can help your weapons pierce earth and occasionally even defy the wind. You are a lightning, wind element kunoichi. The best options for your chosen specialty. Use them. He then turned back to Neji, who despite his shock at the drastic change in his sensei's attitude still looked defiant. You will be getting therapy and... I will not. Neji hissed, his Byakugan flaring to life only for it to instantly vanish when Might Guy lifted Neji into the air by his shirt. Shock clear on Neji's face as he thought, I didn't even see him move. You blame your cousin Hinata for your father's death. You blame a 3-year-old girl for being kidnapped by a jonin. At Might Guy's words, Tenten and Lee gasped as they looked at their teammate, now knowing why he was always so spiteful to the Hyuga heiress. She hadn't even started training yet. Neji. Hyuga don't start training until they're 4 years old, as you damn well know. She's weak. Neji spat back, fury burning in his eyes. She can't bring herself to harm others. Being kind to allies is not a weakness. Guy roared, as he glared back into Neji's eyes, tell me. Has she ever used the cage bird seal? When Neji didn't respond, Guy's glare turned into a smirk, thought so. So Neji, you have two options. First is following your sensei's orders and receive therapy to get over this obvious weakness. Second, I will go to the Hokage and have you removed from Konoha's forces entirely. Neji's eyes widened at the level of that threat. Any branch member removed from Konoha's forces as a genin would receive the locked cage seal where both their eyes and chakra would be permanently sealed. Did his sensei know about that? Silence hung heavy in the air before Neji slumped in defeat. Fine, Neji spat, though in the end it will do nothing. Fate will see to that. Guy dropped Neji before turning to Lee. Lee. As much as it pains me to say this, you need to truly think about your decision to use only taijutsu. Lee's eyes went wide. Was his sensei doubting his dream and drive now? After all he's seen. Your drive is commendable, but you have spent no time in defending yourself from genjutsu. As you are now, should you go into the Chunin exams, then a single D-rank genjutsu could leave you defenseless, meaning your teammates would have to defend you, hindering their ability to fight back. I have also been curious if despite your inability to do ninjutsu are you able to summon. Tenten and Lee gasped in shock. Was Guy sensei saying what they thought he was? The Tortoise clan take most of the credit for forging me into the Jonin I am today. Some say I am unable to do any ninjutsu or genjutsu, but I have just proved one of those rumors false. I simply choose not to use them. The three genin gasped at that. For a Jonin to choose not to use their full skill in battle and still become an elite Jonin and high A rank threat in the bingo book was startling to say the least. One reason I'm pushing you so hard is I am no longer holding myself back. If I'm going to be the best I can be, then you are damn sure I'll make you three the best you can be. Now you have 5 minutes of rest left before we move on to covering your weakness. Enjoy this rest while you can, because from now on training is going to be even more intense than this morning. I will fuel your flames of youth with this rigorous training until they're burning so hot even a volcano pales in comparison. Even Lee gulped in fear. This morning had already pushed them to their limits. If it was going to be more intense, would they even survive to enter the Chunin exams? A few hours later, Shino and Hinata were on the ground panting, exhausted. The Naruto clones that had been originally training alongside them are long gone, and the replacement clones Naruto had sent burst only a couple minutes ago. When Orchid and Naruto appeared, the blonde kept snickering to himself, a twinkle in his eye that promised problems for whoever drew his ire. How'd it go? Yugao inquired. Marvelously. Orchid replied with a beaming smile. He blew away my expectations. Not only did he master the writing exercises I set for him, he also decided to keep the 3 books I laid out so he could go over them more in depth later. With his ability to multitask and you in charge of teaching him, I have no doubt that your genin will be great one day. Well, I'll do my best, Yugao replied, so by your statement we don't need to train here for the next few days. Nope, Orchid replied, I'll work with Naruto in the evenings on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursdays, if that's alright with the two of you. I have no problem with it, Yugao said. Same, Naruto said, I've already got so many ideas on what I can do with Fuinjutsu. Well, you'll have to get better before you can do those ideas, Orchid replied with a smile. Remember to practice with normal ink for a while. Doubly so when working on things like explosion tags. Those can be dangerous to work with even in the best case scenario when you're still new to the art. Got it, Orchid sensei, Naruto replied with a grin as he put his hands behind his head. He needed to get some more paper and ink, but this was something he could easily practice in his spare time. Then he started cackling as he remembered all the blank scrolls the academy gave for when he did his homework. He'd just thrown them in the closet and forgotten about them. Alright, Yugao said after handing Hinata and Shino some water bottles. Since Naruto's training with Orchid advanced so quickly, we'll meet tomorrow at 7 a.m. at Training Ground 6. Naruto, I'll spend a little extra time with you tonight to go over a few things about your mother and some things the academy didn't teach you that they damn well should have. Hinata and Shino didn't feel slighted at Naruto getting extra attention from their sensei. He did have to catch up on things the academy refused to teach them, and Yugao was one of the few people who could tell him about his mother. Do you know who my dad is? Naruto asked. I do, Yugao replied, making the genin and orchid blink in surprise. However, I'm not allowed to tell you at this time. He had more enemies than the average shinobi did, and they would have no issue killing you as a revenge by proxy against him. I believe he left instructions to tell you about him when you make Chunin, though I will need to check with the Hokage about that. Naruto nodded. This just gave him another reason to train hard and become Chunin. He turned to look at the Hokage monument, the carved faces of the 4 Hokages in the mountain that acted as part of the village's wall and natural defense. Determination welling up in him as he looked at his heroes. He'd make it to Chunin, no, not just him. He'd do everything he could to aid Hinata and Shino, both in their goals and in being promoted to Chunin. They are a team now after all. Yugao noticed that Naruto's eyes lingered on the 4th Hokage a little longer than the others and a small smile briefly appeared. When Naruto and Yugao arrived at his apartment, she looked around with a critical eye. The palace was livable, but the door and windows showed obvious signs that the place had been broken into. Slight scratches near the locks, very slight cracks in the window's locks, and the place was bare as if Naruto feared having more possessions that could be broken or stolen. Her eyes slightly narrowed. Due to not being able to watch over Naruto as much as she'd have liked as he was growing up, she wasn't able to be part of his ANBU guard, but they were meant to protect him until he made genin himself, yet there were clear signs they'd ignored their duty or worse, aided in his torment. She'd have to speak to the ANBU commander about this. If the ANBU would ignore orders to protect their Jinchuriki regardless of who his parents were, then what else were they ignoring? Every ANBU had to have some level of skill in Fuinjutsu, and they were all told how Naruto's seal worked under a secrecy seal, so they couldn't reveal it. Wait. Her eyes narrowed again in thought. There was one branch of ANBU that had been independent before it was shut down. Perhaps Danzo was up to his old tricks again. All this went through her mind in moments, but when she turned to Naruto, she once more had her kind smile. All right. Let's go over what the academy should have taught you first. Sitting down at his table, Yugao went over the main points Naruto needed to know, such as a balanced diet and correcting some things that were incorrectly taught. Once that was done, Yugao gave the excited genin a small smirk. Clapping her hands, she said, "All right. Now that all that is out of the way, let's get to the history lesson you care about, shall we?" Naruto pouted at Yugao talking about his mother a history lesson, making her chuckle. As stated previously, Kushina Uzumaki was one of the few remaining members of the Uzumaki clan. Uzushiogakure, their home, was Konoha's sister village. The first Hokage's wife was Mito Uzumaki, and if I'm remembering correctly, Kushina Sensei one mentioned Mito was her great aunt. Uzumaki not only have dense and powerful chakra, but they also have an incredibly strong life force, so they are able to live well past 100 years old. Mito-sama was in her 70s when Kushina Sensei arrived in Konoha. I don't know who the oldest Uzumaki ever was though, so don't ask. Here she gave Naruto a teasing grin, making him chuckle. She was an absolute master of the Uzumaki Tai and Kenjutsu styles, and her mastery of seals equaled if not surprised the 4th Hokage's. Naruto's eyes went wide before a fox-like grin appeared on his face. Well, if she's that good, and I've got the shadow clones I can use to train with, do you think I could become just as good if not better? He asked. You very well might. Yugao replied. No one knows what the future holds, but I can promise you it won't be easy to surpass her skills. The only Fuinjutsu master I know of who had more skill than her was Mito-sama, who was the one who taught Kushina Sensei. Kushina is one of the few S-rank kunoichi Konoha ever produced. Off the top of my head, the only other one is Tsunade Senju. Oh. Speaking of the Senju, I completely forgot to go over something. What's that, Sensei? Naruto inquired, head tilted slightly. The Senju clan, Uchiha clan, and Uzumaki clan are all related, Yugao explained. The Uzumaki clan used to be members of the Senju clan, however, let's see. Yugao tilted her head as she thought. I believe it was 400 or 500 years ago, a small group of senju splintered off from the rest and moved to some islands surrounded by whirlpools, which is where the village got its name. These senju who founded the Uzumaki clan all had what became the Uzumaki traits. Crimson red hair, highly dense and powerful chakra, even more so than what the senju are supposed to have, and a near instinctive grasp of fuinjutsu. As Naruto took this in, something that Yugao had said before finally clicked. Wait, if great-great-aunt Mito was the first Hokage's wife, that means I'm related to the first two Hokage. Correct. They would be counted as great-great-uncles, Yugao replied, though very few people knew Kushina-sensei was related to Mito-sama outside of both being Uzumaki. This would also mean you're related to Tsunade Senju, one of the three Sannin. Seeing his confused look, she explained, the Sannin are the students of the third Hokage. They got the title of Sannin during the Second Shinobi War when they survived a battle with Hanzo the Salamander. Naruto's eyes went wide. Hanzo was reportedly one of the most dangerous shinobi to ever live, and very few of his enemies ever survived meeting him. The other members of the Sannin are Jiraiya, Konoha's only true seal master, though there are others such as Orchid who are at least proficient in the art. He is also the sensei to the fourth Hokage. The third member is Orochimaru, one of the three great traders of Konoha. Each Sannin also has access to a summoning contract, like their sensei. How does one find a summon contract? Naruto asked. There are three ways, Yugao replied. First is to find a contract, though that is rare. Second is to have it passed down to you, such as from sensei to student, with the fourth Hokage getting the toad contract from Jiraiya for example, or down through the clan. The third, while the most direct way, is also the most risky. If you perform the summoning jutsu without a contract, then you're teleported to the realm of the animal clan you'd match best. However, just because the one you'd meet would be your best match doesn't mean they'd accept you. If they don't, then the best case scenario is they'd just send you back. At worst, they could kill you. Does the Uzumaki clan have a contract? Naruto asked. He would like to have a summons, as he's seen the Hokage summon monkeys a couple times, but he didn't want to risk dying yet. He'd just started moving toward his dream. I don't know, Yugao said slowly. If they did, it's either with Kushina-sensei's stored items. If it's not, it's either hidden somewhere in Uzu or it's lost. Kushina-sensei never mentioned a summoning contract, but I also never thought to ask. I'll check with the Hokage first, then we can talk about other options, alright? Naruto looked at her and saw true concern in her eyes. Something he'd only really seen in the Ichirakus. Alright, Naruto said, glad that not only was he on the right track now, but he also had a sensei who was truly worried about him. He wondered if Shino and Hinata were the same. Unknown to Naruto, deep within his mind a large figure in a cage made of red pillars stirred. A single red eye opening. Things were finally getting more interesting. A couple weeks passed with all the genin training hard. Asuma was pleased to see a little progress on Sasuke's therapy. The young Uchiha was still isolating himself, but he occasionally joined in conversations Shikamaru and Kiba had about tracking targets and different ways to incapacitate or kill them. Tenten was making decent progress learning how to use her elements, and Lee had spent a lot of the time he wasn't training meditating to focus his mind to fight off genjutsu or trying to learn the summoning jutsu. Much to his shock, he had managed to summon a baby tortoise on his most recent attempt. Ensui, much to his frustration, hadn't made much progress with some of his genin. Inoichi and Choza had backed him up in how Ino and Choji were trained. Sakura's mother had tried to throw a tantrum and complain to the Hokage about the inhuman training her daughter was being put through, and was shocked when told that while a little more advanced than expected, the training Sakura was doing was normal for shinobi. Hiruzen hadn't been idle either. Inoichi and Ibiki had found that a lot of students had been sabotaged. More than half of the teachers at the academy and its headmaster were guests at Konoha's T&I department for treason, along with a good portion of the civilian council, as the sabotage was done on their direct orders. Hiruzen, as he'd warned Shibi, had put the Aburame clan head in charge of fixing the academy's curriculum. Something that Shibi did with the stoic calm and efficiency his clan was known for. Something many people of Konoha didn't know was that the Aburame clan were sometimes just as smart as Inara. Shibi being one such example. Yugao, as promised, had pushed her team hard. All three had mastered the tree walking exercise and were well on their way to mastering the water walking exercise. Shino and Hinata had also gotten new outfits. Shino's was due to necessity, as once he'd moved on to water walking he needed an outfit that could protect his Kikaichu from the water if he fell in. Both of their outfits had some dark orange on it as a subtle sign that they'd stand with Naruto. Yugao wasn't sure if Naruto noticed the sign, but it didn't really matter since the three's teamwork was on point. They'd already blown past the required amount of D ranks thanks to Naruto's shadow clones, so they could take AC rank if they wanted, but none of them felt they were ready. Hinata had also come farther than she'd expected in such short a time. Naruto's enthusiasm mixed with Shino's calm encouragement had done amazing work in improving her self-esteem. Currently Yugao was standing off to the side watching the three brainstorm on ways they could improve. Naruto was deep in thought as Hinata and Shino considered different survival tactics to use if they were separated from the others. "Hey Hinata," Naruto said slowly as if he was still puzzling it out himself. "Yes Naruto," Hinata said as she turned to him, a couple of Shino's Kikaichu resting on her hand while some were sitting on Naruto's shoulders so they could get used to Shino's hive. "Your taijutsu style, I can't put my finger on why, but it doesn't really suit you. It's almost like, it's too stiff. Like she's forcing herself to be still despite what her instincts are telling her to do." Shino offered as he adjusted his glasses. "I'd noticed that myself, but am unsure as to the reason why." "Well," Hinata said as she tilted her head to the side in thought, "the Juken is often connected to the earth element. Still, precise and powerful. Perhaps the reason I can't use it as well as other Hyuga is I'm the wrong element." "Possibly," Shino considered. "What would it matter?" Naruto asked. "I know some jutsu elements are strong against others. Fire beats wind, for example. Does that really mean as much with taijutsu?" "It might," Yugao said, joining the conversation. Her genin looked at her and weren't the slightest bit bothered anymore by her gray armor showing off her curves a little more than her standard jonin attire. She'd already given them the talk, and explained much about what happened to the body as it grew. The kids had been embarrassed as expected, but once she explained how enemies could take advantage of a teen's hormones, they understood why knowing what was happening was required. Might Guy's style, the Goken, has a lot in common with the lightning element being composed for fast and powerful blows to end a fight quickly. From what I know, the Uzumaki's style is very similar to water in that it can easily flow from a mobile and defensive style to a ferocious offensive style in the blink of an eye, though Naruto would know more about it than I would." "That's a good way to describe it actually," Naruto said as he scratched his chin. "Guy-sensei has me use a dozen shadow clones to run through the basic katas while I get strength and endurance training so I can dodge or deflect attacks before retaliating. Well, I do have to stop myself from moving too much as the Juken is a rather stationary style," Hinata stated as she considered what had been said. "I also find myself wanting to kick the training dummy, but the Juken doesn't have any need for kicks. What if you tried sending waves of chakra into your opponent through your kicks?" Naruto asked as he recalled what Hinata had told them about the style. "Does a tenketsu need a direct infusion of chakra to be shut down, or would a wave of chakra over it work?" "From everything I know, it needs a direct infusion, but a wave of chakra, as you suggest, could still do a lot of damage to the enemy," Hinata mused. During one of their first sparring sessions, Yugao had pointed out that by holding back and not showing what her style could really do was harming her teammates, as they had to take taijutsu seriously, and if they ever had to fight a member of her clan or someone who'd stolen a Byakugan and had reverse engineered the style, it was best to know what it could really do. The Jukin's been refined for decades to use our Byakugan to its fullest and disable Tenketsu with nothing more than a single finger, but that does mean that while it's excellent in finesse, it lacks in raw power. Cloth and leather barely hinder it, but metal armor can be a hindrance. Especially chakra metal from the land of iron due to its ability to spread the chakra we inject into our opponent over the entire sheet of metal. Really interesting, Shino observed. Most would assume that chakra metal would assist in focusing the Jukin's strikes. Kind of like a rock hitting a pond, Naruto said as he scratched his chin before turning to his sensei, Yugao-sensei. How does one learn what their elemental affinities are? Yugao smiled as she pulled out 3 small sheets of paper. This paper is made from trees that have been fed chakra since it was planted. She then handed each of her genin a sheet. Due to that, by imbuing chakra into it, you will get one of 5 different results. Fire will make the paper burn, wind will cut it in half, lighting will make it crumple, earth will dry it out to the point it crumbles to dust, and water will soak it. The more powerful your secondary affinity, the more prominent the second effect will be. Why don't you go first, Hinata? Naruto suggested as Shino nodded his agreement. You're the main one having problems right now. Alright, Hinata said suddenly, very nervous. She'd never heard of a Hyuga who didn't have earth as their main element and didn't know what would happen if she didn't have earth. Taking a deep breath, Hinata poured a little chakra into the paper only for it to get soaked in moments before crumpling up. Hinata's eyes went wide. I'm water and lightning. Is that why the Jukin doesn't fit me? Because both of my elements have a direct relationship with earth. It very well might, Shino mused. Is there anyone in your family that you can ask for help? I should let father know, Hinata gulped, but I doubt he'll take this well, and this might just force his hand into making Hanabi the heiress, as the elders would be more insistent than ever. Even if doing so would undo renewing the alliance with the Uzumaki and Aburame clans. Naruto asked, making everyone look at him in surprise. He had his fox-like grin back and his eyes had the gleam of a prank in the works. After all, you're on a team with the heirs to both clans, and while the Uzumaki clan may be down to 1 member now, it won't remain that way once we grow up. Uzushio could easily rise from the ashes and become as strong as it was in its prime, if not stronger. Plus, I am a direct relation to 3's rank Kunoichi of Konoha, and one of them was the first Hokage's wife, meaning you'd also be allied with the Senju clan, at least once I make contact with cousin Tsunade, that is. Hinata's jaw had dropped from just how deviously clever that was. It was also an incredibly subtle threat from Naruto that if they abused Hinata, they'd lose any chance of an alliance with the rebuilding Uzumaki clan and losing the one with the Aburame clan, and once word of it spread, the Hyuga would lose standing rest of Uzumaki's and Aburame's allies. Possibly even their standing with Konoha as a whole. On top of that, Tsunade Senju was not a woman to be taken lightly even now after all the time she's been away from Konoha, and if she ever returned, she'd have an incredible amount of political power. That is amazingly well thought out, Naruto, Shino said, awe creeping into his voice, which made his teammates blink. That was the first time they'd ever heard anything other than Shino speaking in a monotone. I must admit, despite how devious your past pranks were, I wasn't expecting you to be this cunning. I apologize for underestimating you. Hey, Naruto said, tilting his head slightly as he scratched the back of his head, don't worry about it, Datbeo. Aren't shinobi supposed to make others underestimate them? Yugao didn't even bother to hide her proud smile. The 3 had grown in leaps and bounds since she started training them, and this was just more proof of that. Perhaps she should take them on their first C rank soon. What about Yoshino? What elements did you get? Focusing his chakra, he saw his chakra paper begin to crumble to dust before the corner cut itself off. Earth and wind, huh? Interesting. Earth is one of the most common elements, though to have wind as well, Yugao said in thought. Wind is the rarest of the elements and the best for direct combat. Perhaps once you have more chakra, you'll be able to use that to your advantage. Earth is the best defensive element after all. Defense and offense, Shino said in thought before he turned to Naruto, do you think you could make some seals that can infuse elemental chakra into Kikaichu? If not, I believe I can work with father to find a way to achieve the same results. Naruto tilted his head, it might be possible but that would be a pretty advanced seal. Too much chakra and the Kikaichu might die as they might not be able to absorb it fast enough, and too little chakra and nothing would happen or it would take too long to get any useful results. Kinda like the tree walking, he then pulled out a notebook and started jotting things down, perhaps if the chakra is absorbed over time. His teammates sat and watched him work. Naruto, like all Uzumaki, had an instinctive grasp of the art and despite only working on it for a few weeks, was already as good as some of the more lazy ANBU. Yeah, I think I got something. I think if they absorb a large amount of nothing but the elemental chakra over an entire day, along with a second matrix to accelerate their natural evolution, I'm not sure how long the evolution would take but I'd guess it would be at least a couple weeks. I'm not advanced enough to make the proper seals though. That is fine. Just knowing it is possible is enough for now. I will still speak with my father about this to see if he has another option. If he has a solution then perhaps we could try both options, Shino replied. I will also speak to mother about this as the project would be fascinating for her. Naruto nodded and put the notebook back in his pocket. I'll work on this in my spare time. It'll be a fun project even if your dad has a better option and we don't use it. Now let's see what elements I got. Focusing his chakra, Naruto's paper split in half before both halves grew soggy, wind and water. Hey sensei, what elements did mom have? The exact same, Yugao said. It's one of the reasons she was so dangerous with the two Uzumaki styles. Wind chakra made her blade sharper than even Mizu's Kiba blades, and by channeling water chakra to her muscles she became incredibly flexible and would dance around the enemy's attacks. Did mom have a chakra metal sword? Naruto asked, getting a nod from his sensei. I'm betting she also added some seals to it. She did, Yugao said before her eyes went wide as realization hit. She made a clone which shunshined away. Her sword is still with her stored items. My clone is off to ask the Hokage if we can gain access to them. Perhaps she left some notes on Fuinjutsu which will help you advance. At the rate you're growing with it, you'll be better with seals than I am soon though admittedly among ANBU I'm near the middle tier of Fuinjutsu skill. Do you have your practice swords on you? Naruto nodded, and in a puff of smoke a wakizashi appeared in his left hand and a katana in his right. He'd found he felt the most comfortable with the medium-length sword but was still training with a katana in case he needed the additional reach. If we can get her katana, I want you to start training with that. We can get you a proper chakra metal wakizashi soon so you can put your own seals on it. The cackling Naruto let out made his friends shudder. For once they didn't want to know what kind of seals the blonde was thinking of. Hiruzen sat at his desk going through yet more paperwork, when someone knocked on his door. Curious. Why didn't his secretary inform him he had a visitor? Enter. Looking up he saw Yugao enter the room. Ah. Yugao. What can I do for you? I was wondering if Naruto and I could get access to his mother's stored items, Yugao inquired, both to see if the Uzumaki had a clan summons as I've told you before, and also so Naruto could have his mother's sword and Fuinjutsu notes. Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and stroked his short beard. You believe he's ready for her sword and is he already that advanced in Fuinjutsu? To use in the field? No. Yugao replied. For now he'll use a normal katana in the field, however he should be ready to use it by the Chunin exam at the latest. As for Fuinjutsu he's already nearing my level of skill. Hiruzen's eyes went wide at that bit of news. Using shadow clones he's already got a high level of calligraphy and also uses them to practice new seals. Orchid and I have done what we can but he's growing far faster than we thought. He's truly inherited his mother's skill in the art. Hiruzen nodded. Very well. Hiruzen got up and moved to a picture of his old genin team. Putting it to the side revealed a seal. Biting his thumb, he spread some blood over the seal which glowed before the wall, drew to the sides, revealing a safe with yet another seal on it. After unlocking the safe, he pulled out a rather large scroll with red markings, though Yugao noted a similar scroll with yellow markings next to it. After closing the safe, Hiruzen returned to his desk and handed the scroll to Yugao. This contains most of his mother's possessions, including the deed and keys to her old house where the rest of her items are. I've read the reports from the ANBU commander about how many people have broken into his apartment after you reported what you saw, and want you to help him move into the house. I have failed that young man in more ways than I wish to acknowledge, but that doesn't change the fact I have failed him. Even by preventing him from having a loving family is a move that Danzo would be proud of. Yugao's eyes went wide at that. Even as she sealed the scroll away, by doing so I made myself seem to be one of, if not the only person he could trust. I plan to tell him more about his burden soon and apologize to him. I would like you to be here when I do. Of course, Hokage-sama, Yugao said before she left the room, several thoughts fighting for dominance. Leaning back in his chair, Hiruzen looked out the window and sent a prayer to the kami and Kushina's spirit that his mistakes wouldn't destroy the bridges with the young man who'd become a second grandson to him forever. Keep moving, runts. Ensui barked out, as a couple of his clones continued to try to catch Ino, Sakura and Choji in their shadows as part of the Genin stamina and evasion training. Don't slow down, Sakura. At this rate he'd need to ask Orchid or one of his ANBU associates into getting resistance seals so these brats would train at all times even if they didn't want to. Sakura and Ino were still barely past the level they should have been as fresh genin right out of the academy. At least Choji was now taking training a little more seriously. The genin kept this up for another 10 minutes before Sakura was caught by one of his clones, with Ino caught only 2 minutes later. Alright, that's it for this training exercise, Ensui said, and his clones burst themselves, his 2 female genin falling to the ground panting while Choji simply bent over panting slightly. While you rest we'll talk about new ways to train, Ensui said, smirking slightly as Ino and Sakura groaned. I thought Nara were supposed to be lazy. Ino whined. We are. I'm just focusing that laziness to make your training as efficient as possible so I don't have to do as much. It's one reason you 3 haven't even had a single D rank yet. Ensui replied with a small chuckle, making Ino and Sakura glare at him. Not my fault you 2 are so weak from ignoring your training and dieting. This feels like hell to you. Now let's start with the least pathetic of you. Choji. Your growth has been decent since we started and I'm glad you're taking things a little more seriously. I've considered weapons for you, and we've got a few options. First, simple brass knuckles or gauntlets. Your style is already one based on pure power, so the extra weight of the gauntlets or focused power of the brass knuckles wouldn't change that much. Another option would be a kanabo. A simple but effective weapon, and with your family's raw strength you could give some of the Oni in stories of old a run for their money. Choji gained a thoughtful look as he considered what his sensei told him. Would it be possible to give all 3 a try to see which one works best? Ensui gave his male genin a smile. Something that was somewhat rare with how often his genin got on his nerves. Looks like Choji had grown a little more than he thought. It is, and I was already planning on that. It'll take a little time to get the knuckles and gauntlets though, since shinobi don't normally use those. The closest you'd get are knuckle knives like Asuma Sarutobi uses. With your fire element, if you get weapons made out of chakra metal then very few people would want to get in taijutsu range with you. Turning to Ino he said, Ino, you're a water and fire element. Long-range ninjutsu would be your best bet for offense, while getting a taijutsu style similar to the one the medics use wouldn't be a bad idea either, as their style focuses on dodging and letting your enemy wear themselves out. What about me, sensei? Sakura asked. Well, your earth and water nature means you're mostly on defense, Ensui replied, though you'll need a lot more chakra before I even think of teaching you any jutsu. Apart from earth and water jutsu, you'll also focus on genjutsu due to your high level of control. even if most of that control comes from just how little chakra you have, Sakura wilted. She'd hoped that her sensei would teach her more than all this training to improve her strength, stamina and chakra. Was she really that far behind when it came to what mattered to Shinobi? Sasuke would never bother with her if she was truly that weak. Thinking about the Uchiha again, she winced. How did her sensei know every time her thoughts wandered to her darling Sasuke? How many times have I told you that your fangirl mentality cannon will get you or your comrades killed? Ensui fought back the urge to groan as Sakura's thoughts once more drifted onto the Uchiha. Her mother had really done quite the number on the girl, by telling her she was destined to marry the Uchiha heir, since shortly after the Uchiha massacre. He was beginning to wonder if he should look into getting Sakura out from her mother's care. It would be easier now that Sakura was considered an adult in the eyes of Konoha's laws, but it would still be a huge pain in the ass. Two of Sakura's mother's friends were a couple of the remaining members of the civilian council, and they were already causing a stink about how genin were trained. Something that Sakura's mother had put in motion. Why did civilians have to be so troublesome when they decided to interfere in shinobi affairs? Asuma looked at his genin thoughtfully as they worked on the tree walking exercise. Kiba had come to training without Akamaru today as the pup was training with his mother's hound Kuromaru, trying to learn how to speak English. Kuromaru was able to speak English due to his sire being from the dog summoning clan, and to Kiba's knowledge none of the other Inuzuka dogs had any similar ancestry. It would be interesting to see if Akamaru would succeed. Pushing those thoughts to the side, he looked at the sky in thought. Perhaps he should take them on an easy C rank to see if they're ready for more advanced stuff. A couple days later, Yugao gathered her team after their warm-ups and said, "All right team. So far you three have exceeded my expectations. As such I want to know. Do you three think you're ready for AC rank?" The three looked at each other before nodding. "If it's just bandits and the like we should be fine," Hinata said. "Yeah, we can take out a group of bandits no problem," Naruto agreed, a nuke nin on the other hand. "I agree," Shino acknowledged with a nod. "Genin level nuke nin are rare and we are nowhere near ready to take on a chunin let alone a jonin." "Well, that's why you have a jonin sensei," Yugao said with a small teasing grin. "Now let's go get your first C rank, shall we?" Naruto stood outside his new home and looked back, the dark red two-story house surrounded by a wall of trees, the only entrance being the black iron front gate that had the Uzumaki spiral in the center. He'd known about the place for a while but never thought anything of it. It had a decently sized front yard with a single apple tree in the middle of the left half of the yard and small white flowers around the base of the house. Around the back was a small training ground with a single pond for training water walking or water jutsu. After Yugao sensei had helped him move into the place, he'd made clones to explore the entire thing. He'd easily found his mother's journals, books on fuinjutsu and her sword. Despite how much time had passed, the blade looked as if it had just been sharpened and cleaned, the hilt wrapped in crimson cloth, with the sheath painted to look like it was made of dark blue scales. After picking it up, he made a clone who went out back to practice and get used to the blade's balance. In the meantime, he studied the C's that were barely visible on the blade and smiled. The seals made it so that the blade was ever sharp, never needed to be cleaned, and when wind chakra was channeled through it, the blade moved through the air with little to no resistance. Naruto smiled as he turned and left through the gate before taking to the rooftops, on his way to meet his team at the Hokage Tower. The mission room was large and mostly empty with a single long table with windows behind it. At the desk a clone of the Hokage sat along with a couple chunin. Taking a puff from his pipe, the Hokage said, "Ah. Team 6. A little early today, aren't we?" "Team 6 reporting for AC rank mission, Hokage-sama," Yugao replied. "Really?" one of the chunin asked. "They've only been genin for about a month." "Are they really ready for this?" "They surpassed the requirements I set for C ranks last week," Yugao replied with a smirk, making the chunin blink in surprise. however they didn't feel like they were ready yet. And now they feel they are, Hiruzen said with a nod. Noticing Naruto shifting slightly, he smiled. It is nothing to be ashamed of if you felt you needed a little extra time. C-rank missions can be dangerous. Let's see what we have for you, shall we? One of the Chunin handed the Hokage a large folder who began flipping through it. Let's see. There is a small bandit group harassing travelers, who travel between the land of fire and land of grass. They've been focusing on a small roadside inn and reports say there should only be about a dozen men, however there could be more hiding in the nearby woods. We accept, Yugao said and was handed a scroll with the details from one of the Chunin. Turning to her genin, she said, "All right. Before we head out, we'll head to a shop for shinobi equipment and go over what's needed on most C ranks." With that, the group left the office. Taking to the rooftops as soon as they left the Hokage building, they soon arrived at the shop. The window displayed a couple katana, along with a full set of kunai and shuriken at the feet of an armor stand showing a high-quality copy of Senju-styled armor, the sign above saying, Higarashi's Armaments. Entering the store, the group saw waist-high walls section off parts of the floor, with each section dedicated to different kinds of shinobi equipment such as throwing daggers and different kinds of shuriken, standard weapons such as katana, wakizashi, tantos, bow staffs and the like. A section dedicated to armor, both obvious and hidden in normal-looking outfits. A section for camping, and it even had a section dedicated to fuinjutsu, with books dedicated to the art, bottles of the specially prepared ink, brushes, explosion tags and scrolls made from chakra paper. Naruto, who'd gone to take a look at the scroll's eyes bulged as he saw the price. A single scroll was worth almost 3 times what a single stack of explosion tags cost. Most fuinjutsu users make that expression. A tall man with a couple scars on his face and arms, brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, black eyes crinkled as he smiled down at the blonde. He wore a simple white shirt under a blacksmith's apron. Chakra scrolls like that are the best option for large complex seals, as it slightly amplifies the power of the seal. The few people who buy it normally only do so after a couple back-to-back A ranks. It's a pain in the stock, but well worth it when it's sold. Naruto nodded, thinking about what the man told him. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. Perhaps I'll see if I can take some solo D ranks and save up. The man smiled as he turned to Yugao. Gotta admit, Yugao. When I heard you'd taken a genin team, I thought they'd turn out to be some snot-nosed brats like most genin are. If the other two are like this one, then they'll go far. It's obvious the kid's already considering what the chakra scrolls can do, and he's willing to work for his goals rather than expecting things to be handed to him now that he's a shinobi. Yugao returned the grin. I got a good set, Tenchi. In fact, these 3 are about to go on their first C rank, and we came so I could teach them what items they'd most likely need. Looking at her genin, she said, "This is Tenchi Higurashi. A retired elite chunin and one of the best blacksmiths in the village. Glad you're not half-assing teaching them." Tenchi grinned. It's still surprising how many Jonin sensei don't even go over what the genin need on C ranks until after they've already gone on one. Tenchi gave the 3 genin one last nod before going back to the counter. Alright, so for this C rank we'll be gone for a week or 2. Do any of you already have camping gear? Yugao inquired, her genin shaking their heads. So we'll get a full set for each of you then. You'll want to get your tents and sleeping bags checked at least twice a year to make sure they're still watertight. Shino's Kikaichu can take care of any pests that try to harass us, but we won't always have an abarame with us, so you'll also want some insect repellent. Field rations are also a must, as you won't always get a chance to hunt for food. The genin nodded. While they hadn't gone camping before, they had learned the ins and outs of hunting. Yugao then went over everything else the genin would need on most C ranks. After making their purchases, which included a tent for each genin even if they would likely only require 2 for this mission, they headed for the west gate, signed out and left Konoha, taking to the trees only a couple minutes away from the village's walls. It took a couple days to get to the inn, but before they entered, Yugao had them take civilian disguises as they didn't know if the bandits were spying on the inn. It was run by an older couple and their grandson. After speaking to the grandson, they learned the bandits would come every 2 weeks and the next attack would most likely be in a couple days, so for the next few days Team 6 helped around the place, mostly keeping to the background. Early in the morning before the attack, Yugao put security seals on the door and window to hers and Hinata's room. All right. Let's review the plan, Yugao said. I shall hang back and support you all with my Kikaichu, Shino said as he adjusted his glasses. Along with some of Naruto's explosive tags tied to wooden darts, Shino had come up with the idea of making wooden darts to throw, as metal kunai were both costly and, as one would expect, useless after the tag went off. However, these darts were easy to replace, as even just a single branch from Konoha's trees could make several throwing darts. Kunai were better as daggers or all-purpose tools, while also using some earth jutsu to hinder their movement. He was slightly annoyed that he hadn't mastered any wind jutsu to the point they'd be useful in battle, however he knew that in time he would. He'd already gained a good deal of chakra from all the training. He simply needed to be patient. I will disable as many bandits as I can with my Juken, Hinata stated. I am also to use my water and lightning bullets when I have a clean shot. My clones and I will also support Hinata, Naruto declared seriously, his katana strapped to his back and his wakizashi on his waist, along with protecting the civilians. We also need to let at least one bandit escape so a clone can follow them back to their camp. Once we know their camp's location, we move in and strike before they can retaliate, Datbeo. And if any nuke nin appear? Yugao asked. You'll step in. If we're attacked before you do, our goal is to evade and survive, Shino replied. Very good, Yugao said with a small smile, very proud of her genin. Each one had blossomed under her teaching, especially Naruto, but that could also be due to the fact that for the first time in his life he had a proper teacher and friends to support him. She hoped that their first kills wouldn't affect them too badly. A few hours later, Naruto made 4 clones, who, using the transformation jutsu, taking the forms of Team 6 in their civilian disguises, and had them leave the inn and move west as if continuing on their way to the land of grass. The 4 shinobi waited in the shadows for the bandits to appear. 10 past noon, the bandits charged through the archway to the road only to be met with Hinata blocking their path, quickly followed up by Shino's Kikaichu and 4 wooden darts, 2 of them with paper wrapped around them, forcing the bandits to make a circle. A horde of Naruto's clones wielding katanas and wakizashis appeared out of bursts of smoke, preventing their escape. Throw down your weapons and surrender, one of the Narutos ordered, making the bandits sneer. Surrender. To a couple snot-nosed brats. One of the more muscular bandits snarled, his bare arms covered in scars showing how long he'd been a bandit and how many fights he'd been in, a slightly chipped kusarigama in his hands, the heavy round weight spinning before him as a makeshift shield. You brats are decades early if you think you can beat us. Get them, boys. With a roar, the group surged towards Hinata. Moments before the explosion, tags went off, taking out the couple bandits at the back, the men screaming in pain as the explosions made their legs useless. The Kikaichu then surged inwards, easily darting past the bandits' awkward swings. One of the lookout clones burst, letting Naruto know that there was one more in the trees who'd just bolted, with a second lookout clone in pursuit. Take him down. All the Narutos roared, half of them surging forward while Hinata let loose with a half-dozen elemental bullets. The water bullets detonating before reaching the bandits, coating the lead bandit and the man right next to him in water, and with how close the two were, and the lead bandit losing control of his weapon due to surprise the chain wrapping around his comrade's arm, when the lightning bullets slammed into the bandit wielding the kusarigama, the electricity traveling through the water and Chien shocking both enough that they collapsed to the ground, twitching and unconscious. The rest of the bandits fell just as quickly. Naruto leaves some clones to remove their weapons and restrain them. Yugao ordered the remaining clones from the battle saluting and quickly getting to their task while the rest of Team 6 bolted into the woods following Naruto, who was leading the way to the camp. Once there, Hinata scanned the place with her Byakugan and signaled that the bandits didn't have any captives, before releasing another volley of water and lightning bullets at a trio of bandits, all of whom wore metal-plated armor and had higher quality weapons, signaling they were most likely the leaders of the group. Just as it had done with the first two bandits, the trio went down quickly, though one of them managed to force himself to a knee before Shino's hive swarmed him and started draining his chakra. Naruto's clones were dealing with the few other bandits, however one member of the armored trio had managed to get to his feet and was about to use his heavy mace to bash Hinata's head in when she spun around, her hand lashing out and closed a couple of the tenketsu on his arm, making him drop the weapon before shooting an already charged lightning bullet directly into his face, the bandit falling back dead, though Hinata didn't focus on that yet as there were a couple bandits left. Once the camp had been cleared out, and the bandits either dead or safely contained in stasis scrolls, the genin sat around the remains of the bandits' campfire as they processed their first kills. Who got the first kill? Naruto gulped. It was one thing to kill a deer or lynx but another to kill a human. Shino did, Yugao replied, making the genin give her curious looks. I left a clone back at the inn and one of the bandits he got with the explosion tags died of shock. Then Hinata got one of the bandit leaders with a lightning bullet. Hinata nodded, recalling the man who'd attempted to hit her with a mace, and finally one of Naruto's clones cut down a bandit who was about to throw an axe at Shino. There were others but those were your first kills. Now I know this is hard. Believe me, every shinobi who isn't mentally unstable goes through this. Is killing always this difficult? Hinata asked as she fought to prevent herself from throwing up. No. It gets easier, but that's both a blessing and a curse, Yugao sighed. Many jonin who focus on combat missions tend to get to the point where killing is barely noticeable, but that's not a pleasant concept to talk about. So I'll tell you the same thing Kushina-sensei told me and my teammates when we had our first kills. Yugao held back a sigh. It still hurt remembering her teammates. Every time you take the life of a bandit or nuke nin, don't just think about their life. Think about the lives of the innocents they took, how you avenged them, how you gave them peace, and also think about the lives of the people that if you didn't put the bandit down would be in danger. Shinobi life is not easy, nor is it glamorous. We're soldiers, spies, assassins and thieves. While other villages and even others in Konoha might see it differently. In many ways we are the shadows in the night who keep even worse shadows at bay. We fight so the civilians don't have to. We fight to protect those close to us. We fight to keep whatever evils this world might have, from getting a foothold and causing untold havoc. The three genin sat in silence contemplating Yugao's words. After 10 minutes they looked at each other and nodded. Eternal peace might never come, Naruto started, holding out a fist. But that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for, Hinata continued, knocking her fist to Naruto's. Nor does it mean that fighting for whatever form of peace we can get is a worthless pursuit, Shino stated as he copied Hinata's actions. After all, Naruto said with a grin, nothing in life that's worthwhile is easy to get. The three said simultaneously. Yugao fought hard to keep herself from crying out of sheer pride. These three who had started out barely knowing each other had become the best of friends. She couldn't wait to see how far they'd go. Asuma's frown deepened. Just as he thought his team was ready for AC rank, Sasuke went and proved him wrong. Before they'd even started the day's training, the Uchiha heir had almost attacked Kiba after the Inuzuka asked how the therapy was going and if the Uchiha wasn't going to run off at the first sight of his target for revenge like a wild boar. As punishment, Asuma had Sasuke running through a course that included a tall wall for tree walking and the training grounds pond for water walking, along some other things that would trip the arrogant kid up a little. Sheesh, Kiba said after he finished his set of push-ups for the morning's warm-up. Asuma had doubled his normal set as punishment for the way he'd phrased the question, I get he wants to go after his family's killer, but he really needs to learn that he's nowhere near ready to fight an elite Jonin, let alone an S-rank Jonin. That's rather surprising coming from Yukiba, Shikamaru drawled as he laid on his back instead of doing crunches. Most of the time you're more hot-headed than him. Kiba shrugged. Chalk it up to pack logic. Right now we're near the bottom of the ranks for Konoha's pack, so going up against someone good enough to be Konoha's alpha is damn near suicidal until we get closer to his level. On top of that, do you think the killer has stopped training? Akamaru let out a couple barks of agreement. Asuma let out a bark of laughter. So you do use that brain for more than just tracking, fighting and food. Kiba just flipped their sensei off, though there wasn't any anger behind it, as this wasn't the first time Asuma had made that kind of joke. I've been meaning to ask, Shikamaru said as he sat up and looked at his sensei, why did the Hokage split up the Inashika Cho team this time? I was wondering when you'd ask. Asuma chuckled before shooting a quick glare at the Geinin, who groaned but started doing crunches. Your families might have been allies even before being brought to Konoha, but that's also made the combination predictable. Enemies might still struggle against your parents, but as things are, you, Choji and Ino wouldn't be able to keep up with someone who expects those strategies. The three of you will train together in the future, but for now we need to get your individual skills up first. After all, the three of you are not your fathers who could work perfectly together even as genin. Shikamaru paused his exercise to give Gus Sensei a quick nod. While he and Choji could work perfectly together, the two boys could only barely tolerate Ino's bossy attitude. Shikamaru still pitied his best friend for being on a team with both the blonde and pink-haired harpies. So do you have anything special in mind for our training? Shikamaru asked when he completed his warm-ups. A couple days ago Choji said that cousin Ensui was considering a couple weapons for him. Yeah, I remember Ensui saying something along those lines, Asuma mused as he stroked his beard. Let's see, Kiba's feral style wouldn't mesh well with most weapons as he needs his hands free, however there is something that might work. Ever hear of Ebola? Nope. Kiba replied as he looked at his sensei curiously. They're two weighted balls connected by a cord or chain that you throw at the enemy to either tie or trip them up, Asuma explained. You mostly find them in areas like the land of grass or sand, as they work best in wide open areas. Too many trees and they'd either crash into one or wrap themselves around it. So a ranged weapon that would hinder my opponent's movements, letting me and Akamaru charge in? Kiba asked, getting a nod from his sensei. Yeah, I can see that working with my family's style. Would it even work when hunting? For larger game it should, Asuma said. Doubt it would work on wild boar and the like since their legs are so short. Makes sense for Kiba's style, but what about me? Shikamaru asked. Oh, I got something in mind for you, don't worry, Asuma chuckled. You are going to learn archery. Archery? Shikamaru repeated. Why? Simple. What would happen if with the aid of one of Naruto's seals you could attach some thin wire to the arrow? You wouldn't even need to hit your target. You could just use the wire to attach your shadow to him. Something that would exponentially increase the range of your family's unique jutsu. Shikamaru was stunned. Why had no one in his family thought of that yet? Even something as simple as a fishing line could be used for this. And if what he'd heard about how quickly Naruto was advancing was true, then he had no doubt that the blonde could easily whip up a seal to connect the line to the back of the arrow. Is that why you've been focusing on my arm strength recently? Got it in one, Asuma replied as he pulled a scroll out of a vest pocket and tossed it to the Nara. That's your training bow, along with a quiver of 20 arrows. I set up some targets a short distance away that a clone will lead ya to. I know a little about archery, so I can at least teach you the basics. Kiba, it'll take a bit for the bull I ordered to get here, but once they are we'll see just how compatible they are with your family's style. Might Guy watched his team train, though honestly, only Lee and Tenten had grown. Neji was digging his heels in and barely training the jutsu that Guy had given him to learn, and for the life of him Guy didn't know what to do. Earth release. Mobile Soil was a basic C-rank jutsu but versatile due to it being able to be used in just about every environment. The jutsu was used to alter the ground according to the user's will to make it difficult for enemies to keep their footing, and with Neji's Byakugan the chances of this jutsu tripping him up was incredibly low. It's not like he was asking him to master an A- rank like the Rock Dragon. Tenten, however, had already learned not only the Earth Bullet and Rock Wall Jutsu to augment her skills but also Gale Palm Jutsu to increase the speed of her thrown weapons, the Wind Cutter Jutsu which she could easily perform with one of her swords for a ranged attack or could use it to make her blades far sharper than they'd normal be, so even a humble kunai would be just as dangerous as her sharpest sword. For lightning, she was studying the lightning bullet and lighting whip to give not only more options but a weapon the enemy couldn't just take and use themselves. Lee learned how to sense when he was under mid to low rank genjutsu and had found that by using the original hand signs now known as the kuji and enchanting their names it helped him focus his mind to the point he could throw off most low-ranking genjutsu with ease. He'd also started learning how to use a couple weapons such as tanfa and the bow staff. Sadly, he didn't have the skill or desire to use the nunchucks in battle, but he had taken to training with them to improve his hand-eye coordination. It baffled Guy that Neji would stick to his clan's tradition despite there being very easy ways to augment the Juken. Even something as simple as a glove with chakra metal wires would work, as with their mastery over their chakra they could turn those simple wires in additional fingers to shut down Tenketsu at range. Perhaps Hinata would be interested in the idea. As a water element, a weapon as flexible as the wires could be at least a decent match. Yugao had already asked him for scrolls on some water and lighting taijutsu styles that would mesh well together. While he didn't know of any shinobi who used wired gloves, that didn't mean it was impossible or hadn't been done before. He was curious if the young Hyuga heiress would rise to this challenge, or if she couldn't. See if her children could if they shared her elements. And that's all I have to report, sir, Yugao said as she stood before the Hokage's clone, who as usual was in the mission room. Letting out a little smoke that became the leaf symbol, the Hokage nodded. Very well done. Your genin handled themselves very well. Looking at the genin and giving them a grandfatherly smile, he continued, each of you will receive the bounties of the bandits you killed, as well as a fifth of the bounties of the captured bandits as is protocol for when a bandit camp is taken care of. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Shino and Hinata said, while Naruto said, thanks Gigi. Hinata, Shino, you two are dismissed. Meet me at our training ground tomorrow at the normal time, Yugao said. Naruto, you and I need to see the Hokage in his office for a small talk. Yes, sensei, Hinata and Shino said in unison. Both figuring the Hokage just wanted to know how his surrogate grandson's first C rank went in person. See you tomorrow, Naruto, Hinata said. Shino nodded. Indeed. Father would also like to speak to you next time you are at the compound. Got it. I'll make sure to speak to him before getting to work with Orchid Sensei, Naruto nodded. Speaking of your work with Fuinjutsu, the Hokage said, my son mentioned Shikamaru wishing to speak to you about some possible seal to aid in his training. He's being very tight-lipped about what those seals might be, though he promises that whatever it is, they're working on would make even Shikaku annoyed that he never thought of it. Oh, this I've got to see. Naruto snickered. This might be the first time that Shikamaru's pulled a prank on his old man. That's one way to put it, the Hokage agreed, before Naruto and Yugao turned and left the room. Inside Naruto's mind, the caged being once more stirred. Things had been going well for their host. The being had a feeling on what the old monkey wanted to talk about, and if they were right, well, they just hoped the kid would make it through the latest hurdle in his life.